NRA President David Keene joins us now to talk about last night's debate and the president's comments. David, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening to you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's great talking to you. So first of all, you know, Barack Obama was consistent last night in the debate. He said exactly what he has said all along. He doesn't like the fact that we can own semi-automatic firearms, doesn't like the fact that we can own handguns, and would really like to do something about it.
That's right. You know, it was a strategic error on his part because while we know he holds those views and he has stated them consistently through his career, he has tried to avoid in the last year or two any comments that could wake up or infuriate the Second Amendment community because he knows the consequences of a head-to-head fight with America's gun owners. He knows what happened to Al Gore in 2000 when the NRA was credited with denying him the electoral votes of 5 states and thus costing him the White House. He's learned the lesson from Democratic liberals who are in fact anti-gun, but who have been running in recent years trying to keep the whole gun question off the table. What happened last night was that the president was surprised by an unexpected question on firearms, and he answered honestly with his beliefs rather than continuing to cover things up. He, in essence, came out of the closet on guns, and he said what we've always known he believes. One, he wants to reinstitute the discredited Clinton so-called assault weapons ban. Two, he doesn't much like sidearms, and he'd like to do something about them. You know, he always talks about how he's a Second Amendment supporter. All he really wants is, quote, common sense, unquote, restrictions on firearms. Based on his history, from before he ever ran for public office, to his time in the Illinois legislature, to his time in the Senate, and when he campaigned for president and appointed Eric Holder his attorney general, he has wanted to do everything in his power to strip Americans of their Second Amendment rights. He hasn't been able to do it because he can't do it through the Congress because there's a bipartisan majority that believes the Second Amendment means what the founders wrote. He hasn't been able to do it in the courts because the courts are not dominated by people who think the way he does. But if he gets reelected, he'll be able to change the courts, and he will be able to accomplish much of what he has in mind. So this was quite a moment, and I hope that around the country, gun owners were watching that debate because, as I say, Barack Obama came out of the closet and said, you know something, NRA, you were right. I don't like guns. I'd like to do something about them, and I'm really offended at the fact that gun owners support my opponent.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, you know, any gun owner who bought into this line that, you know, I don't have anything to worry about. Barack Obama's not going to do anything about my guns. Sorry, that excuse doesn't fly anymore. Not after you've heard the man himself say that he wants to get something done on this issue in a second term. But it's not just these, what he referred to as, you know, I think battlefield weapons of war. And God forbid we ever equip our fighting soldiers solely with semi-automatic firearms,
That's
David.
Right. Well, he did what the anti-gun folks have been doing for decades. What Bill Clinton did, what the mainstream media did during the fight over the Clinton gun ban, and that is that he gave the impression that the guns he was interested in controlling were machine guns. He kept talking about automatic assault weapons, the kinds of things that are built for warriors on the battlefield. That's not what the Clinton gun ban was about because, as you know, and as your listeners know, you can't go out and buy a machine gun. And you haven't been able to do that since the 1930s. The restrictions on the possession, sale, and use of machine guns are far stricter, for example, than the background checks and constant checking that goes on if you want to work in the White House. And they're just not available to the public.
Absolutely. David, I got to ask you as well, what did you make of the fact that Barack Obama, you know, Mitt Romney said that he did not support any additional gun control laws and brought up Fast and Furious, even brought up the president's claim of executive privilege and withholding documents from Congress. And boy, the president sure went out of his way to not respond to Fast and Furious. in a debate in which it seemed like the president pushed back against almost every one of Mitt Romney's
But
assertions.
that one he wanted to avoid because he's been leading the cover-up. It's his people. His invocation of executive privilege was so outrageous that even the Washington Post editorialized after he did it that saying that's not what executive privilege is for, and that he was misusing it simply to cover up what may be misdeeds or incompetence on the part of those who work for him. Fast and Furious is a huge scandal, perhaps the biggest scandal that any president has had, which has not really gotten the public attention that it should. And Barack Obama does not want to get into the weeds on that. The one time in recent months that he touched Fast and Furious was when the reporters on Univision asked him about it, and he tried to say, well, you know, that was a Bush program, just like everything else that's gone wrong.
Right.
And as soon as we found out about it, we stopped it. ABC News came back and said, Mr. President, Fast and Furious was initiated in October of 2009 when George Bush was in Crawford, Texas, and you were president of the United States. And the evidence, the emails, the testimony reveals you didn't stop it when you found out about it. You stopped it when it became such a hot potato that you wanted to separate yourself from it, and then you involved yourself in what's a classic governmental cover-up. So he doesn't want to get into those weeds again because he got stung just by sticking his toe into them. And he's hoping that he can get past this election without people really realizing what went on in that operation.
And you know, David, it's interesting if you think about it. I mean, we're going to have a much easier time finding out what happened if Barack Obama is a one-term president.
Oh, absolutely. If he's not there to protect Eric Holder, and Eric Holder's not there to protect the people that worked for him and who he gave permission or authorized or ordered to do these things, it's all going to come out. And, you know, we've seen former Justice Department officials in this one taking the Fifth Amendment before Congress.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen an attorney general cited for contempt of the House of Representatives, contempt of Congress. We've seen a president illegitimately claiming executive privilege to cover things up. It's the same kind of thing that went on, for example, during the Watergate scandal years ago. And once he's gone, and hopefully he will be on November 7th, once January arrives, it's all going to come out because the pressure that he's put on his underlings is going to be non-existent at that point.
Talking with David Keene, NRA president. And, you know, David, we're less than 3 weeks before Election Day. I saw a story from New York Magazine earlier today. Mayor Bloomberg backing a slate of quote-unquote bipartisan candidates. And buried in this story, I thought was something fascinating. He says he's planning to spend between $10 to $15 million on 6 to 12 candidates. But, quote, to increase the tactical edge and to avoid turning his favorites into targets for opponents, Bloomberg won't identify the candidates he's planning to bolster. Now,
I'm talking to you right now from Reagan Airport, and I'm about to board an aircraft to go to Bangor, Maine. One of the candidates that has received $500,000 in support from Michael Bloomberg is Angus King, the so-called independent and former governor of Maine, who's running as an anti-gun candidate in that state. Fortunately, it appears now that Charlie Summers, the Republican candidate, who is a pro-gun candidate, has a very good chance to beat him. But you're absolutely right. Bloomberg is investing his money in candidates who he thinks have a chance or an opportunity to tip the balance, particularly if Obama happens to win. Because if pro-gun forces don't have enough senators, then Obama is going to be able to do pretty much what he wants to do in terms of judicial appointments and even in terms of a head-to-head face-off with the Second Amendment community on things like the Clinton gun ban. So if our slogan, if our theme, the NRA's theme this year is all in because of the importance of this election, Michael Bloomberg and his ilk are all in as well.
Absolutely. And you know, the difference, though, David, it just strikes me as night and day. I mean, here you have the NRA's Political Victory Fund and Wayne LaPierre and Chris Cox and yourself. going all over the country, appearing with candidates, supporting candidates publicly. Candidates are happy to have the support of the NRA. They want the endorsement of the NRA. And here you have Mayor Bloomberg swearing up and down that the vast majority of Americans supports his proposals, and yet he can't even admit who he's supporting financially for fear that it will harm those candidates.
That's because he knows darn well that the American people do not support what he wants to do. It's been demonstrated in election after election at the national level, at the state level, at the congressional level, and at the local level, that in most districts, and there are exceptions obviously, but in most districts and in most states, the majority of people support the Second Amendment and support it strongly. We were involved in the recall election in Wisconsin, where Governor Scott Walker, an A-rated legislator, an A-rated county executive, and then an A-rated governor, was facing a recall. We went into that state, and we did exit polls, commissioned exit polls on recall day. And the first question that the pollsters asked voters coming out of the polls was, do you support the goals and ideals of the National Rifle Association? And 45% of the total electorate said yes.
Wow.
Now, if you'd ask them if they supported Michael Bloomberg's proposal, it'd be down in the 10-15% range. Fact of the matter is that the reason they don't want to show their hand to the public is the public will slap that hand down because the public doesn't support what they want to do. They keep talking. Remember the New York Times headline right after the Aurora shooting? It was an interesting headline. It says, 12 dead in Colorado, reopens gun debate. It was almost as if the New York Times thought, well, 12 people would be a reasonable price to pay if we can just get another shot at this in a public debate. That debate went on for 30 years. In the late 1960s, Michael Bloomberg and his people had what looked like majority support in this country. There was the poll after poll after poll showed more support for gun control. The cultural wars were beginning. And what's happened during those 30 years is that issue has been debated in the Congress. It's been debated on the media. It's been debated in the print media. It's been debated in the states and in referenda all around the country. And a consensus is pretty well developed. And that consensus supports the Second Amendment and the right of American citizens to keep and bear arms. It's that simple. They had their debate. They lost the debate. Now they have to operate, as Barack Obama told Sarah Brady, under the radar, because they can't afford a face-to-face confrontation with believers in the Second Amendment, because if they have such a confrontation, they lose, we win. And fortunately for the American people, Barack Obama, inadvertently, I think, and mistakenly, during last night's debate, moved his positions out into the open, where people who believe in the Second Amendment can see them and can vote based on them.
Talking with David Keene. David, one more quick question for you. I know gun owners in Ohio and in Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin and in Virginia were paying attention. These battleground states are very much in play. I would note as well that the states that the Obama campaign is now trying to hold on to are the states that the NRA actually went up with advertising in this week. Not saying there's any coincidence, but maybe one has something to do with the other. Do you see the battleground broadening as we get closer to Election Day, and are more and more states coming into play, and are more states falling out of play for Obama?
Oh, that's absolutely true. It's closing up in states that were considered to be off the table a month or two ago. Look at Pennsylvania, which was assumed from the beginning to be in Barack Obama's column. The Obama campaign is starting to spend money there advertising because it's closing up. In the Senate race there, the Democrat was supposed to be a slam dunk winner, and he's now only leading by 2 points. There are Senate races all around the country that were supposed to be easy rides for Democratic incumbents. Take Ohio as an example, or Connecticut. Races that were supposed to not be contestable, where it's even or the Republican is pulling ahead. And they're pulling ahead because of the bipartisan disappointment and outrage at the way this president has performed in office over the last 4 years. And one of the things that goes into that mix is his attempts to harass gun dealers, the Fast and Furious operation, the acts of Eric Holder, the constant testimony. After all, the Attorney General has been before the Congress twice in the last couple of years saying that the administration wants to reimpose the Clinton gun ban. So these are not secrets. It's just that this time the President of the United States stood up on a stage in front of 40, 50, 60 million Americans watching it on television and said, yep, that's what I want.
David Keene, NRA president, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program tonight. Always a pleasure getting a chance to spend some time with you, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks.